Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Ideology.
This is Infants on Thrones. The philosophies of men mingled with humor. We are the core.
So today's episode comes from one of those recordings where you just turn on the mic and see what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and be upfront with a certain disclaimer that this episode isn't nearly as focused around a particular topic as many of our other episodes. However, as we wandered from topic to topic, from philanthropy, or the lack thereof as a post-Mormon, to our experiences growing up in a big Mormon family, to birth order, to sex, to the atonement, to parenting, I started to see the topics cluster around a general theme, which was, in my mind, ideology, particularly how subscribing to the Mormon ideology influenced our upbringing and how unsubscribing to that Mormon ideology is influencing our adulthood and shaping our future. So there you go. Be warned, it's a little scattered, but in the words of that immortal bard, Charles Wright, it's not what you look like when you're doing what you're doing. It's what you're doing when you're doing what you look like you're doing. Express yourself. Wait, what? You know what? Never mind. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Here you go. As I've left the church, I've become extremely skeptical and critical of ideology. But at the same time, with that loss of any subscription to ideology in general, because my wife is a liberal Democrat, and that's kind of an ideology that she really taps into, and that's something that she's very connected to.
Cool. I like it.
Right, it is cool, and she's always been that way, even in the church in Utah Valley, like. Growing up in Utah Valley, like she's always been that way. So, but I don't know, I felt that way for a little while, but then I've kind of come to the point where I'm just kind of like, well, I'm kind of more of an independent in a lot of ways. But the thing is, like, when I've become as disillusioned as I've become with ideology, because I've seen what kind of ugly things you can get wrapped into when you subscribe to an entire ideology. At the same time, I've lost. I've become pretty flaccid in terms of like actually volunteering for things or becoming motivated to go knock doors or do something about something that I really feel strongly about. So like, I guess I'm having a hard time renegotiating that cynicism that I feel, that cynical skepticism that I've fostered and kind of always is in the back of my mind. And it's kind of like, well, like a Red Cross, buys Lamborghinis with your money, so don't do anything. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like a lazy
really goes to the people. Yeah.
Right. What percentage really goes to the people? And like, it seems like kind of a lazy cop out, but I don't know really how to feel differently about it, No,
and so, I'm the same way. I identify myself as a left-leaning independent because I have the same chip on my shoulder, like, never again will I subscribe to some organization who dictates what my belief system is, and therefore I conveniently also don't have to give money or time or energy to anything or anyone.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And
isn't that nice?
Yeah, I feel like an asshole a little bit. Because
you know why?
Why?
Because neither of you have kids.
Maybe. Explain that a little bit more.
Elaborate.
Once you have kids, that's where your money goes. I mean, for me, that's where like my philanthropic efforts go to raising my kids and supporting their school activities and sports and things like that. The expendable income that you have to be able to donate to a charity is reduced. I don't know. I mean, it probably depends on your
I thought
your
you
income.
were going to take it a different direction. That's actually a fascinating concept because that's the best of both worlds in a way. I mean, of course, having children is a huge commitment and kills your free time and all that stuff. But it also sounds great as a way to channel energy that's way better than on yourself playing computer games more. So
I still play computer games, but I mean, my point is that I don't feel that guilt, like I'm not giving 10% to the church, or to humanitarian causes or whatever, because I feel like my philanthropy, my humanitarian efforts are going towards making my children good people, like good citizens and good neighbors and good friends, and that's my project, and it's very hands-on,
Right.
Yeah. So. Oh, and that's admirable, because that's I would imagine that would be the first area that I would invest in too if I were in that position with a child or children. But not being in that position, it does make me wonder, what to do other than be an armchair critic of everything, because that's the most fun, but it doesn't really produce anything, right?
Yeah. You're just
you get a couple of podcasts out of it.
True. But you're just some asshole. Like, really, that's literally your entire identity is just some asshole that said one thing about one thing. Like, you don't matter, And I don't know. It's not like I just want to matter. Like, I don't want to have kids so that they can validate my my own insecurities.
I want kids so I can no.
Right, but. Yeah. So how did that change? Like, I guess I'm wondering how the hell do Mormons do it? My brother has 5 kids and he's in the stake presidency, and I mean I don't even understand how that's even fucking possible.
What do you mean?
Like, because it's a time like you're spending when you're in the stake presidency. That's like 15 hours a week.
Yeah.
And how are you good at your job? That's the other thing. Like, I mean,
right.
Yeah.
We live in America, and if you, at least in my limited anecdotal experience, if I just put in exactly 40 hours a week, I would like underperform. Maybe it's just because I suck at efficiency or something, but I swear if I had like that overhead of every evening covered with soccer practice / priesthood meeting, I would suck. Like I would have to struggle just to like keep up with my peers.
Yeah. So you know what you're proving right now?
What?
That these Mormons who do this get extra blessings and bolster from God.
I mean, like, seriously, is that what's happening? Or they just? I mean, my parents, they had too many kids.
Here's the story of a lovely lady,
and they just ignored the middle ones,
who was bringing up 3 very lovely girls.
That's really what they did. Like, in practical terms,
all of them had hair of gold, like their mother, the youngest one in curls.
The middle ones, like kids, there were 8 kids.
And it is enough to fill our lives with love.
Kids 5 through 7, just, no, it was more like 4 through 6. It was just like, fuck them, they'll be fine. Hopefully they'll turn out, and they did more or less.
The older ones will help with the chores. They'll teach
the older ones help with the chores, and they got kind of the brunt of attention at the very beginning before we were swamped by children. And the younger ones, you get a few years at the end to kind of make up for all of it. But but the middle ones, it was just like, I'm sorry, you're kind of on your own. You'll always have food and a place to sleep. That was basically all that, So
that's funny, because I maybe I shouldn't admit this, but I kind of identify with that. I come from a family of 6 kids, and I'm number 4. I'm smack in the middle.
Yeah.
And my youngest brother did get a lot more attention, and my older siblings. I'll just leave it at that. I resonate with that where the scholarships or the savings for education kind of were burned through before my time, and then at the very end it was like, oh, but now that we're down to our last one, let's double down and help them out in all these other ways too. And then in the middle is like where we struggled with a couple of us there in the middle. So I totally get that.
Right, and it's kind of odd because. If you ask my siblings, I think out of the 7 of my siblings, probably 5 of them would immediately say, if they asked, who's the favorite son of my mom, who's the surviving parent, 5 out of 7 would say me, even though I'm the apostate, and so it's kind of, I mean, I feel bad about that.
You're the youngest, right?
Yeah, I'm the youngest. So, I feel bad about that, and I don't want to. Like, my parents did the best they could, and like having 8 kids, that's incredible. That's crazy. That's a challenge that I would never have the courage to undertake. but kind of in the same way that like I don't have the courage to undertake the challenge of
one.
I don't know, jousting on rhinos or something. You know what I mean? Like it's like,
or what Glenn said, of one child.
Right. Hey, I'm getting there.
Yeah. Maybe someday, right? That's the same with me. I'm like, I'd like to eventually in the indeterminate future. Right.
So, and I don't want to like disparage them because they did a lot of great things, and I think my parents are incredible, and they did a lot of really great things.
I see my mother kneeling with our family each day.
But at the same time, like at some point, time and love and attention is a finite resource, and at some point you have to. The only way to give
is that true?
Another party. Yeah,
love,
time,
and attention and time are a finite resource.
Time and attention for sure.
Time is on my side. Yes, it is.
Because there have been numerous studies where face to face in the same room, time spent with a child, that counts. And there are 24 hours in a day. Like that's just the fact. So basically, you can love them. But if you're not fucking spending time with them, then like, shit? I don't know.
Isn't the counter to that not every minute is equal to another minute? Like there are ways to theoretically, anyway. I'm talking out of my ass, but theoretically, you can love in a concentrated, way better way for this 10 minutes versus this shitty 10 minutes that this parent just checked in and said, "Well, I checked the box of time for today."
Actually, according to I think the preponderance of sociological evidence is on the side of. It's showing up. It's the time spent there. And quality time is important, but really the quantity of time is
You're saying it's a low bar. As long as you're not like beating your child during that time, you're probably
if you're showing
okay.
up if you're showing up and engaging in some way, that's the big change.
Interesting.
The increase turning the engagement up to 11 doesn't really bump the amount of the effect necessarily as much. So it's time spent. So time is definitely a finite resource, and by extrapolation, attention. And so if that's boots on the ground, what's actually going on with a kid, then at some point, I don't know exactly. There's no magical number, but at some point, the only way to provide provide an increase of time and or attention to one child is to reallocate it from another activity. And if you have too many kids, then it has to be taken away from other children to allocate it toward the one.
I noticed that you've focused on time and attention now, but you've left love out of that equation because that's more difficult to quantify.
Well, because what is love?
What is love?
It's difficult to quantify.
Baby, don't hurt me. Is that the one that?
But the thing is, if you're not spending time actually engaging with your kids, your love doesn't really matter. It kind of matters, but it only matters to you. It doesn't really matter to them.
What's love got to do with it?
I don't know. I kind of want to throw my parents a bone a little bit because there's a story I tell sometimes with friends, and I guess I'll share it here, where there's one time in high school where I thought I was being super rebellious, and I took off for a weekend with a friend, and we drove from we drove from Utah to guess where to
Idaho.
Of all the places to go. Did I already say this story?
Yeah, this was in your mission. Thing. No, I love it. I
haven't heard it.
Go back and listen.
Yeah.
No, so yeah, I was super rebellious and went to Idaho for a weekend, and then when I came back, and my dad was like, "Hey, I didn't see you this morning." I'm like, "Dude, it's been 2 days. What do you mean this morning?" Because the first time he's seeing me is like Sunday afternoon. He's like, "Oh, was there like an activity or because I think I came back. No, I don't even think I was back for church." And he was a little worried about that because missing church or that's one check-in moment that you can't avoid when you're all together as a family or whatever. But the fact that I was gone for 2 nights and my parents didn't notice stuck with me. But at the same time, I don't necessarily hold them that accountable for it, because.
But I hate to tell you, that's not throwing them a bone. That story does not throw them a bone, Bob.
No, that completely confirms what I'm saying.
That was the setup. Let me explain.
Okay, all right.
What could you? Okay, go ahead. Okay, explain how your parents not noticing that you're gone for 2 days reinforces their love for you.
And time and attention.
Yep.
Well, okay. So I was gone for 2 days, and I was like 16 or 17 years old, feeling pretty responsible. But I always had this streak of independence and self-sustainability, and I feel like maybe I'm too loosely correlating things, but being a middle child and having that lack of pamperedness really empowered me in this weird indirect way, because it's not that they didn't care. They certainly did. And they were there to support me in the important moments. They didn't forget like key milestones, or I'm not the child that like, they didn't remember my birthday or didn't do anything for me. This is just one example of like, they were busy that weekend probably. They have 5 other kids and they didn't notice I was gone. And in the end, it was empowering because they also didn't judge me or, be sick to their stomach in a way that like I couldn't do anything for the first time in my life until I was out of the house.
How are those not all different flavors of neglect?
Right. I mean, that's the thing is like, they empowered me. I just feel like this is spin for neglect. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
I was trying to help Glenn by saying like their love for me was so strong it permeated through the lack of time and attention that
you're
Jake was relying on.
You're equating a lack of judgment, which we could talk about judgment, but you're equating a lack of judgment to love when it's really just a lack of attention, regardless of how that attention is focused. I don't know. It wasn't that they didn't not trust you. It's that, we weren't aware.
I mean, that's the thing. Is right. I mean, it just sounds like apathy to me. I mean, I'm sure that they loved you, Bob's parents. If you're listening to this, I'm sure you love your children. You love Bob very much, as do we. But it's that I don't know. That just that speaks to a level of not apathy. I mean, it's not like willful in that way, but it's kind of a just. Like you're putting out fires, that's the negative attention gets the focus because you don't have time to put positive attention into people because you're already spread so thin.
Yeah, and remember when we poked all those holes in your patriarchal blessing? Let's talk about your father. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
We believe in nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, let's talk about the love.
Let's
talk about the love that your parents have for you. Poke, 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 poke.
Right, yeah, and I don't want to shit over your parents' love because I'm sure parents' love is very strong, and I don't know shit about it because I'm not a parent. So
that was an important moment to you. But if I understand what you're saying, that was an important moment to you because you felt like you had completely defied them, that you were being rebellious, and you were the prodigal son in this story, and you were gone for 2 days, and when you got back, they might not have roasted the fatted calf for you in return, but you weren't punished. They weren't angry with you. They were cool about it. And so you're like, hey, all right, my parents, I'm going to throw them a bone here because they were pretty awesome in that situation. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I feel like it's kind of diluted now, but we'll run with it. That's the best we can do.
Okay.
I feel like they sure did have their misgivings and lack of attention. That's not without some negative consequences too, which I'm sort of glossing over. But at the same time, they didn't do it so willfully or hurtfully. Like it's just what Jake was explaining 15 minutes ago. They just had a lot of kids. There wasn't enough money. There wasn't enough time. And even though in the moment when I originally had that experience and over the years I sort of used it as a way to almost be frustrated or poke fun at them, I feel like I've transcended that. And now I'm like thinking back and thinking, all things considered, for having 6 kids, that was actually not that bad at all, and showed something that is just nowhere. Maybe I am overly compensating and putting a positive spin on it. But I think it ended up helping me in the end, the fact that I was a middle child and more self-sustaining as a result of that. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
I mean, that might be the case, because and I'll admit this freely, I'm glad that I married somebody she's the youngest as well, but she's, I don't know, she's from a family of people that were born at the age of 30. So it's just kind of, there are people that like were born with life skills. I literally have the life skills of a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
I haven't paid a bill in 5 years. Mm-hmm. Any bill.
That sounds like, I know people like that, and that's not me at all.
I've never paid a bill in 5 years. I haven't planned. I haven't gone grocery shopping. I mean, I went grocery shopping for the first time in like 3 years 2 weeks ago. Right? I have garbage life skills.
Do you do your own laundry or cook your own food?
I do my own laundry, and I like cooking. I do cook. I'm no good at like planning the meals and getting the ingredients.
Erica does wear the pants. I've seen this.
Yeah. So, right, and I like it that way. I mean, whatever. Yeah. Balls are overrated. So, I don't know. Maybe that did help you out. I mean, it sounds like it did help you out, Bob. You seem to have everything put together. You seem like a very organized, put together guy. But like, I don't know. But at some point, you have to put the caveat of, for having 6 kids, it wasn't that bad. For having 6 kids, we didn't live in a trailer, and I didn't have to kill rats for food.
Right.
But at the same time, I mean, it wouldn't. Like, couldn't all those spirits from the pre-existence, couldn't they come down just a little bit slower, but all with a little bit more love and attention if we all had 4 kids instead? You know what I mean? Like,
Yep. Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. And in fact, I want to embrace what you're saying, because this reminds me of another topic that's related, and that is that I kind of give my parents a little bit of a free pass because of I guess how old they are and this generational gap. Like, there's certain things where when I see my siblings do something, I'll be more upset or frustrated, because I'm like, come on, we're on the same like wavelength of development in terms of, and I know this is very ageist and sounds horrible, but it's my way of compartmentalizing why my parents haven't, when people stop like listening to new music and you're like, oh, that's when you gave up and you decided no new ideas were worth it anymore. And, for my dad, it was 45 or whatever, it's, and I assume it's going to happen to me at some point where I'm going to be like, get off my lawn, you kids. And it's not that they aren't well-meaning and they were good parents in their day and age, but there's like residual leftover stuff from the way society functioned back then that I feel, and especially when you put the church angle on it, that just I can't get back. So there are aspects of my being raised in the church, in the time and place that I was raised, that I won't be able to undo. And I feel like there's always a little part of me, because of my age and where I was raised and how my parents raised me, that's always going to be a little bit like homophobic, sexist, and racist. Like, just a little bit. Like, I fight against it all the time, but it's just not 100% erased.
Yeah,
but,
no, that shit doesn't go away. No. Yeah,
it doesn't go away. And I kind of blame them for that a lot, and I blame the church a lot. And I especially, but then I also give them a free pass because of this, like, this reverse, it's like a backhanded bitch slap compliment of throwing them under the bus because they
didn't grow up watching
old.
Sesame Street, right? They didn't grow up watching Mr. Rogers, having these kind of liberal acceptance. You can have people of different colored skin living on the same street. Sesame Street. It's pretty. Bert and Ernie being gay.
Rubber ducky, you're the one.
Going pigeon. I love it.
You get that little thing going in there, So it sounds, Bob, like you judge your siblings differently than you judge your parents because of the time in which they were raised, and you think that your siblings should be more open-minded to things and more current or more modern than your parents, who might be more defined by an older generation. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so then it makes me almost, it's probably the wrong reason to want to have kids, but it makes me want to like multiply and replenish the earth with kids who are raised without that filter on life perpetuated by the Mormon Church, because it's time. It's the 21st century. We're past a lot of these fundamental ways we treat human beings that aren't okay anymore. And I just hate the fact that there's a part of me that still justifies or embraces, that little sliver of racism, sexism, homophobia, that I have to, it's just not completely absent. And I want to accelerate the next generation of kids not to have any of that, not to have to reverse engineer their personality like I had to. And then when I see that that's not happening because of all of these people in the church raising their kids slightly better than the last older generation, but still kind of in a weird, institutionalized, this group is better than that group sort of way, it just really rubs me the wrong way. And I don't have a solution for it, because obviously I don't have kids. And who am I to tell through a podcast my siblings or anyone out there that's a believing Mormon how they're doing a shitty job raising kids, and I would do it better if only I cared to. What a message. Great. Good on me.
Yeah, you've got to be really careful, don't you, Bob? Because you've got a couple of siblings who regularly listen.
I do, and I don't know what to do about it, because I just said a lot of shit. That's just...
Right.
Oh, but you've been drinking. Say that you've been drinking. You can blame it on that.
Blame it on the alcohol. Blame it on the alcohol.
Free card. That's get out of jail free. Well, I think that there's a large sense within the ex-Mormon community. And, everybody has this. I mean, Mormonism is based around this idea. The entire atonement is based around the idea that there's some sort of situation where you can hit the reset button and kind of retroactively just fix everything that's been wrong with your life. There's this yearning to be able to retroactively apply some sort of correction. And ex-Mormons do this as well. And you see this when people leave the church at 30, then even though they have 2 kids, they'll get a babysitter and they'll drink all night and then puke their guts out and be super hungover. And it's like, dude, the time to be 19 and drunk as shit is over, and it'll never, ever be back. And you'll never be able to relive that moment authentically. There's no atonement there's no catch-all for retroactively applying everything that you wish had been different. So, but I still want that to happen, and I still feel that in a lot of aspects of my life. I want that to be the case, and I act almost as if that could be the case, but it's not. It's over.
Is the atonement really a reset button?
I mean, if you think,
kinda,
yeah. I mean, the effects of the atonement, especially for gay people, but
really?
For people with any type of abuse. Any people who grow up in an abusive situation, it's pitched as a reset button. All the suffering and horrible aspects that you've lived, horrible aspects of your life that you've lived in this mortal life, will be somehow undone by the atonement, and all of that emotional and psychological trauma that's been done will be glossed over and patched over, and the paper that has been wrinkled and torn to shreds can somehow be put back together in a perfect state.
So how do you account for the sins of the fathers being answered upon the children, and that sort of thing, because that isn't eradicated by the atonement?
Yeah, no, the atonement says that it takes upon all the sufferings of the children of men.
But when? But I mean, so it's not like a reset button in your life. I mean, you've kind of got the sacrament where you can take the sacrament and you're forgiven of your sins for that week. I mean, do you mean it like that, where you're?
No. I mean, after this life, there are effects of mortality that you have to live with and endure throughout this life, but in the next life, everything will be made right, and it'll be made as if those things never happened.
So somebody who's blind or somebody who has one arm, when they're resurrected, they're made whole.
Right,
Is that what
exactly.
You mean?
In the same way, you're made whole emotionally and psychologically.
Or let's bring it just back to reality. Somebody who's perpetually attracted to
reality.
I'm just saying, the one-armed man is one hypothetical, but how about somebody who's perpetually attracted
for all
to
our amputees? I'm sorry. For all our amputees, we acknowledge your pain, and
we know that it's legitimate. I'm just saying you're a minority case. I'm sorry.
Right.
But the majority case is for all those, and not just men, but I'm going to just call it men for now because it's convenient. For all those men in the church who are perpetually attracted to lots of other women other than their wives.
What?
That's just no problem at all, because in the future, in heaven, it's just you and your wife. And by the way, you'll get an opportunity for more wives anyway, so that's why it's natural now. But don't feel bad. Just keep repenting over and over again the fact that other boobs are awesome too, and you'll be totally fine, because that's just the way that the world works, and you'll get to experience all those other boobs in the future because you're going to be married to lots and lots of women. So you're good.
Did you really think that?
Not
directly, but indirectly, yeah.
Absolutely. Anything that could be attributed, any sinful impulse can be attributed to the natural man, and that aspect of yourself will be expunged as a result
but Bob wasn't talking about the desires being expunged. He was saying that you're going to be able to satiate those desires in the afterlife because of polygamy. I mean, that's not the atonement hitting a reset button. That's the most
cynical read on it. Granted, but it's kind of true.
But it could be one, or it could be one or the other. It could be that they'll be satiated. It could be that they
go away.
That they go away, or maybe you.
See, I don't know. I never ever felt like I had to repent of being attracted to somebody else. You know, like. If I'm just like looking, going, wow, she's really attractive, I didn't feel like that's a sin.
But then let's ask the question in reverse. Did you ever think that as a god you'd have that problem, or you'd have that attraction anymore? No, you'd think it would just go away somehow, or it would be fulfilled in some way. It wasn't like
wait. So that when you're a god and you're looking down at your children who you've created on the earth, that you would be attracted to those children? Is that what you're talking about?
Not children. I'm talking about like all the horizontal other gods living on their own clouds next to you. I don't know how. Nobody knows how the system works.
I never thought of it, man. Okay, it never crossed my mind.
The same. Like, so if sexuality is an aspect of your personality or of the characteristics that you have as a god, as a celestial being, you'll never have a sexual impulse as a celestial being that will lead you towards something that's sinful. And so whatever aspect of yourself that does that, that'll be gone. That's the way I interpreted it.
That's how I interpreted it too. The natural man is an enemy to God, and by the way, he doesn't exist anymore once you are a god. Isn't that convenient? So it's kind of problematic here now. It's true that you have these sexual desires and impulses, but just keep repenting over and over again. That's what the sacrament's for, and you'll be good, because in heaven that just goes away or gets fulfilled, and it's going to be awesome.
Isn't that the role that the devil plays as tempter? And that when the devil is finally bound, you won't have those temptations put before you. So it's not so much that it's just natural man instinct. I mean, maybe that's eradicated somehow in resurrecting to a degree of glory, but you also don't have the devil as tempter putting those thoughts in your mind. But I never thought about those things.
Did you never hear the explanation of the devil being bound in the millennium as he'll be bound by the righteousness of the people, right? Everyone will be so righteous that the devil won't be able to tempt them. So let's say the devil's temptations are radio waves, right? We just won't have an AM transmitter, right? We just will crush the AM transmitter, and so that's kind of the model that I subscribe to.
Because that's how
Satan's always out there sending out
So you thought that he would still be acting as a tempter, but those who are alive in the millennium just won't pay him any heed.
Right, they'll be so beyond being able, because in Helaman it describes in Helaman, I don't remember exactly what the verse is, but it's like the people have become so humble and so righteous that they had no desire to sin anymore.
And they all cried with one voice, saying, "Yea, we believe, because of the Spirit of the Lord Omnipotent, which has wrought a mighty change in us, that we have no more disposition to do evil, but to do good continually."
Basically, like they had gone beyond, they'd reached that perfect Zen state of not even wanting that. They were in nirvana. And so, like the temptations of the flesh weren't even an issue because there was no receiver on the other end to even. pay heed to them.
Glenn, you didn't have to believe. I feel like I'm resonating with Jake a bit more because it sounds like it's like a foreign concept to you, Glenn. Somehow, like your disproportionate amount of sexual desires, which, admit it, you're just like the rest of us worldly men. You explained it away in a different way, or like, didn't you have to have something in the future state of becoming a god or moving past some kind of natural man that made it all okay here and now?
Right. How did you account for the gap between the desires that were at odds with the commandments of God that you had now and whatever the state of godhood you imagine, whatever state you imagine godhood to be in?
Well, I think I just explained it, that I felt like I felt like the world that will be, whether we're talking about the afterlife or the eternities, whatever state you're in, is so fundamentally different from what we experience now that you can't even really compare them. It's like an apples to oranges thing.
I love
that's what I thought, So, but I wasn't guilt ridden by being attracted to other women in the ward. I mean, there were times where I'd be like, okay, I'm looking at that person too much. I need to stop. But it wasn't like, man, I am a sinful, evil person for that. And I'm a sinful, evil person, and someday I won't be, because I'll be exalted, and that'll come through this mechanism.
Wow.
I never thought about it that way.
Someone didn't read enough Boyd K. Packer as an active believer.
I hardly read any. Seriously.
Well, didn't in Alma, isn't there a set of a chapter where it talks about how the same desires and the same characteristics that we have now will be will be present in the life afterward?
For that same Spirit which doth possess your bodies at the time that ye go out of this life will have power to possess your body in that eternal world.
Like, that's what I internalized. And so I said, every aspect of me now that I don't feel like is in harmony with God's commandments, that'll be gone. That's what the atonement does, right? It kind of scrubs those out and resplices everything together, right? It's like a bypass surgery.
Yep, I felt the same way, because otherwise I couldn't explain it. I couldn't explain it away. I felt like either it had to go away, or me as a person, I must be an exception, because I'm attracted to women all the time. This is weird. Is this not a issue with anyone else? And of course, I was kind of I wasn't like in the jock crowd where everybody talked about it. It's just something you didn't talk about. I was actually a pretty good Mormon in that way. So it was just me and my thoughts, and having to reconcile what I thought was like a very sinful set of thought crimes happening over and over again with this understanding of godlyhood and this aspiration of heaven that only could make sense if all that went away.
Yeah, I didn't see. To me, I was so afraid of ever being in a position where there could be something that would happen from that attraction, that I just buried it really deep, to the point where I wouldn't even talk to, if I was attracted to somebody, I wouldn't talk to them. I wouldn't really acknowledge them. I was probably kind of cold to them, not intentionally, like I hated them, but just I didn't even want to go there, so I guess that was I thought that as long as I did that, as long as I controlled it and kept it in check and never allowed anything to happen, that I didn't have to worry about anything in the afterlife. Like I always thought that the Alma stuff, like those desires that continue in the afterlife, I always thought of that more in the lines of Word of Wisdom stuff, alcoholism, smoking, the stories of the guy in a bar that all the ghosts are trying to get a sip.
Alcoholism and smoking, but conveniently nothing to do with sexual impropriety.
No, wait, I didn't. But it was a different category for me. Yeah.
But when it's a different category, I mean, when you say you buried it, did you feel that those impulses would be gone, or somehow they'd be redirected? Like, what would be different? I mean, if you felt the need to bury it, obviously you felt like it was at odds somehow with the way that you should be. So how did you justify that aspect of yourself in context of being an exalted being that is in a state of perfection? But
I never took it to that. I never took it that far ahead in the future. It was something that would go away eventually. It's like, okay, I feel attracted to somebody right now.
But you're saying you're confirming what we're talking about.
In a year I won't. But I didn't think that was the atonement doing that. I didn't think that was any external thing that was hitting a reset button on me.
Did it? Let me ask you guys maybe a little closer to home or a little more specific. Did it for you? Because I guess maybe it's the alcohol in me that's making me willing to admit this. But did you experience, like, after getting married, you were like, oh, now I'm married, all that's going to go away? It's like the most naive, like, Mormon mentality ever as a man to think that when you get married, all of a sudden it's like, and now I'm attracted to one woman after today. I'm like, wait, how come that's not true? What's going on? I'm still seeing other things that I want to look at. That's weird. And that disconnect was just a stronger iteration. I mean, it was already bad enough as a single person who had to oppress all those feelings because, we're not allowed to have sex before marriage and all that stuff, or masturbate or do anything. And then once you're married, you think that, like, oh, it's just going to completely go away because now I have an outlet and I'll never look at another woman again. But then that's not true, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think the really hard thing to deal with was feelings of regret, like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't have married this, but maybe I should have married that person over there. Why is that person with that guy? I'm better than that guy. Oh,
I didn't have that issue. I just had the, like, how come I can't fuck everyone? That's just the more honest, carnal desire in me that floats somewhere and that I always have to suppress and be like, because gods don't do that and you'll eventually not want it either. I'm like, oh, okay.
I honestly, I don't take it that far. Like the desire, like,
that's amazing.
To me, it's not like a carnal kind of thing like that. It's more about, like,
you understood biology or what?
No, it's wanting to be appreciated and to appreciate and, like, aware, like, to have that kind of relationship. Like I think for me, like, I could I don't have any alcohol in me, so I don't know, maybe I'll just edit this out at some point. But I could be like a sultan that collects, like, hundreds of beautiful, intelligent, fascinating women, and sex may come into it at some point, but it's mainly just having that collection around me that I'm very, like artwork kind of thing.
Well, I'm the sheep of the beat. Your love belongs to me. Well, at night when you're asleep, into your tent I'll creep. Not half.
How?
Yeah, it's more
so
like
highbrow.
Yeah. Is that highbrow?
Like, some of us just think with our dicks. What are you talking about?
Right? Yeah, like me. I don't know.
It's funny to hear you say that's highbrow, because I don't look at that
as
horrible.
Yeah,
right. Exactly. That's what I'm thinking.
I mean, the sexist implications are horrific, but. The fact that the attraction, that you acknowledge that the attraction is based around something other than sex, is something that's the highbrow aspect of it for me. Exactly. I don't know about Bob.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
But I don't know. I felt similarly. It's just
I was always
really
terrified of sex, man. I grew up freaking
me too,
terrified
but not in my
of sex.
head.
Yeah, even in my head,
exactly.
I was terrified of it.
I mean. Even in your head? Because in my head, I think, oh yeah, man, there's all these women I'd love to have sex with. But, like, honestly, if they came up to me and were like, okay,
let's have sex, I'd be like, whoa!
Yeah, exactly.
We both have we have a free half hour. We're both free for the next half hour. I got a little love nest 10 minutes away. Let's go have sex. I would be like, I wouldn't be able to get it up. No way. Like, no fucking way. I'd be like, this is the most terrifying thing that's ever happened to me. But in my head, that attraction would be there.
It's funny because I did have the opportunity to experiment with that in between marriages. So, like, I did have those kinds of opportunities where I'm like, my instinct right now is telling me to turn around and run the opposite direction. So I'm going to ignore that instinct and I'm going to plunge in, kind of thing.
And were you able to do it?
Yeah, but it was weird, man.
And yes, she's more experienced than a normal girl, but sometimes love should be terrifying.
I don't know. It was weird.
Right. I mean,
it was weird. I'm glad that I did it because it confirmed to me that that's not really my nature. That's not what I'm about.
Right.
You know, but
you're more about collecting women as trophies. So we get it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, seriously, that would be the ideal. If I could be like a sultan kind of thing, because I
love how we're like debating like which is worse, wanting to have sex with all women or just collect them for their looks, and I'm putting them on plaques on the wall.
But hey, I didn't just limit it to looks. I mentioned intelligence as well.
He did mention intelligence. That's what made him highbrow.
That's right.
Well, about that first cool cat, he said, man, look at that. Man, do you see what I see? Well, I want that little chick. I want that little chick. Hey, man, you have one chick for me.
See, don't you guys think that wouldn't it be great to just eradicate this whole line of thinking from the next generation? Not that I'm saying we can intrinsically because we're far superior parents, but maybe I am partly saying that. It seems like that we'd have a better chance at it than those that raise kids in the Mormon paradigm, especially males.
How would you be able to eliminate? How would you be able to eliminate this line of thinking?
I don't know. I wish I could back that up. I want to throw.
It's not a line of thinking, though. I mean, you're talking about biology.
But only sort of, because Mormonism has to reinvent itself around the biology without calling it the biology. That's the problem. So it sort of accentuates it in a way that at least I would be honest with what it really is and feel like. And I know people are rolling their eyes if they're parents and talking to a non-parent, describe how I would do it this way. But I feel like eliminating religion from the formula could only help the real conversation be there to be exposed for what it is, rather than like faking your way through it by saying it'll all work out in heaven later.
You know, Bob, I'm almost afraid of bringing this up because I don't want to ruin it. One of my favorite things listening to you talk is when you go into this voice and you do this. And it reminds me of that Martin Short, Ed Grimley character. Do you know who he is?
I know Martin Short, but I don't know his character.
You don't know Ed Grimley?
Tell me more. It seems to me that he would be a pretty decent guy, I must say.
I'm okay with this.
You got to look at Ed Grimley. Yeah, that's my favorite when you go into that. Anyway.
Yeah, I like it. It's a clear indicator. Yeah. He's imitating, some caricature. I like it. I like it.
It's the straw man voice. It is.
Right. Exactly. It is the straw man voice. Well, I agree with Bob that there's a way to be able to avoid this, but there's a way to be able to avoid some of the angst that people experience by. It's extremely difficult to become sexually monogamous and sexually active at the same time. That's extremely difficult, and that's something that I think could be avoided in some way if you take some of the stank of religion off of sex and just say, you know what, it's really about the people involved, and it's about the emotions and the connection of the people involved, and whether or not you want to expose yourself to that type of vulnerability with that person.
Right.
And I think that will help localizing the impact of sex and not making it this existential, like ethereal, sin-based idea will help a lot. But at the same time, like, at the end of the day, sexual monogamy is a trade-off. Like it's a trade-off. And there's a lot of biological impulses and implications for it that are counterintuitive, but at the same time, there's a lot that make a lot of sense. And so you just have to decide if it's one that that's is worth making to you. And if it is, then fucking do it, But
and even even post-religious people have to sort of justify their way through it, because if you think about it, marriage as a societal construct wasn't invented by atheists. It kind of came out of a very rigid, conservative-based approach to how men and women need to eventually settle down and interact with each other, whereas biology is a complete odds with that if you just look at any other species. And it's kind of this weird cognitive dissonance, at least that sometimes I have, when it's like, oh, why am I functioning this way in society? Oh, because that's how we all do it. Why do we all do it this way? Oh, because we're all coming from the perspective of a religious-based attitude towards how even the way our laws are written, the way expectations are, just the way it impacts your career, and then that's why whenever I hear about, somebody having an affair or somebody cheating on somebody else, in the Mormon paradigm, my first thought would be like, oh, what a sleazebag, or I can't believe slut, I can't believe she did that, or, that guy, I can't believe him. But now I'm like, that's like the number one most obvious way that somebody's going to do something that society doesn't like. Like, why is that, vilified so much? Because you've made a commitment, but then at the same time, you've made a commitment because you were sort of forced to make a commitment because that's how the world works. And I don't have another alternative plan. And it does work in other ways, but it is interesting how we sort of have to force ourselves into why it's still better than whatever alternative, just because it's just so happens to be what we're all living, right?
Well, it's one of those situations where people coming from completely different sides from completely different mentalities can come to the same conclusion about a moral aspect, about like more, the tenets of morality. And, it's similar to like, there are people that encourage guests to take their shoes off when they come into the house, right? But if some of them tell the guests, hi, don't take your shoes. Please take your shoes off because we want to keep our carpet clean, and people dragging, dirt on their shoes because they're walking around all the fucking place with their shoes. And then the other half of the people say, don't wear shoes in our house because if you do, your legs will be blown off. Like it's the same kind of conclusion, but like the context of the two really kind of determines how people internalize it. And I think it's more healthy to do it in a way where the impact is more visible and more easy to internalize and understand. You made a commitment to somebody. If you hurt them and you're dishonest to them, then that's just wrong. Like, this is somebody you're purporting to have affection toward, and you're hiding something from them that's very important to them, and that's a wrong thing. I think that's a more healthy way of going about it than, our Father in the sky will strike you down or something like that, I
totally agree. And I have a question for our resident I have kids person, Glenn. So, Glenn, you had kids as a believer, and then you had kids obviously as a non-believer. Did you have any sort of epiphany or transitional, and this is a weird question, but I'm asking it anyway, like, did you all of a sudden want to change how you raised your kids, or is that just completely a naive, non-parenting way for me to think about it? And your crisis had nothing to do with your parenting. No,
my crisis definitely influenced my parenting. Yeah, I think, but there were things that I saw my mother-in-law, who is just an absolutely horrible person. And it's like she's the type of
your previous mother-in-law.
Yeah, my previous mother-in-law, who just like when she was a stake missionary, would wear her name tag everywhere, just stop everyone. She was like the first person that was campaigning down the street for Prop 8 kind of thing. But my way of describing her is like Marge Simpson in there's this episode where the whole family leaves, Homer, Lisa, Bart, they're all gone, and she's alone with Maggie, and Maggie's asleep, and she's just bored because like there's no problems to solve. So she kind of sneaks into Maggie's room, and she goes up and she bumps the crib, and Maggie starts screaming. She goes, "Oh, honey, here, let me take care of you." Oh, that's my ex mother-in-law. So like seeing the way that she raised her kids, and then the way that impacted the way that my ex-wife raised our kids. And kind of in contrary ways, like that was the first distinction for me. Is like I don't want to raise kids that way, and then it was kind of tied to the church in certain ways. So I'll give you this example. My daughter, who is 14 now, when she was, I don't know, maybe 1, she's just really, really young, and she got to the point where she learned how to strip her pajamas and her diaper off of her. And so every morning would go in and would find her, and she was just stark naked in her room, which is kind of a scary thing when you've got to clean stuff up if it leaks out, you know. So, but my ex-wife, she had bigger issues with it, and she's like, "This is immoral." You know, I don't want
a 1-year-old.
Yeah, she didn't want her to feel.
A 1-year-old.
She would look at her and say, "You're bad. You can't do this." And Jesus doesn't want you to do this. She picked her up and held her in front of a picture of Jesus that we had in our hallway. You know, that very ruggedly handsome Jesus. You know,
exactly.
And
Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah, and right, and said
that's the guy.
And said Jesus doesn't want you to be naked. Jesus does not like naked girls. And I was appalled. I'm like, how
could you?
There wasn't really anything I could do or say about it, you know, without just inciting wrath. But the next morning, and this is what I love this daughter forever for this. The next morning, we go in there naked as a jaybird. But before my ex-wife could say anything, she goes, "No, it's okay, Mommy. It's okay. Jesus says it's okay." I went, yes. So, I mean, definitely there were things in raising kids and messages that they would get at church, messages they would get from, you know, the other side of the family, that I just thought I've got to protect them against this. And
but you're giving examples of this is still Glenn is like some kind of left-leaning believer. I'm wondering if what I'm talking about resonates with you to the point of being frustrated with your old self. Like, did you have a transition where you're like, oh, I need to overcompensate, and you had all these sit-downs with your kids, and I know this is silly for me to frame it this way, after you left the church and had enough time?
But you got to remember, Bob, like my slow burn out of the church was a really, really long, slow burn. And like my take on the church and the value that I had from the church, you know, even at this time when, you know, she's 14 years old now, so this would have been 12, 13 years ago, that we're talking about. And I had been slowly burning. You know, I think I had my master's thesis at this point, you know, so I'd been through graduate school. Things were already starting to change in my sensibilities that way, but there was still value that I had in the church. I don't think I have an answer to your question where I looked at ways that I parented before and said I've got to change that, because even with my oldest, who's 17 now, I don't know. I don't think I ever indoctrinated her with things that I'm like, I've got to reverse that.
So it seems like your disaffection kind of tracked more or less along with your children's physical development, because it seems like a lot of these parenting changes come along with physical developments within your children, puberty, that type of thing.
I thought of one. Okay, so priesthood blessings. Priesthood blessings were always a huge problematic area for me, because I started thinking that priesthood blessings were stupid very early on. That this was a relic. This is a form of magic. This is
why I'm laughing so much.
Yeah, this is like some faith healing that we do. You know, it's a placebo, laying your hands on their head and doing this whole ritual thing. And the like, if you really think carefully about it, the idea that this all-powerful, all-loving God, who obviously knows that my child is sick, could heal them right now if he wanted to. But he's waiting for me to jump through all these hoops, you know, consecrating this oil, laying my hands on the head, saying the words in the right way, in the right order. And it can't be my ex-wife. It's got to be me. It can't be anybody. It's got to be me, because I have the priesthood. And then God will heal my child.
Maybe.
You know, if it's His will, you know. But like that I have to be this catalyst to activate the power of God.
Right. Don't let your subscription expire.
Yeah. I just
that makes perfect sense.
It really started unraveling for me, and I didn't want my kids to think that they didn't have access to God except through me. So I really made a concerted effort try and subvert, maybe is the right word, teachings that I had given them earlier, or maybe that I had supported earlier from church, and just saying, you can go to the Lord and you can ask for things and get just as much. Because I didn't have a disbelief in God. I believed in God. It wasn't the same Mormon God, but there's been an evolution in what I think God is, if there is a God, kind of thing. But at this point, I wanted them to feel that they had a direct access and that they were empowered in and of themselves, and they didn't need a man, they didn't need a priesthood, they didn't need any intermediary, they didn't need an authority figure to tell them that they were worthy. So I think my 17-year-old was probably at a very young age when that started, and so she's. If there was any reversal, there wasn't much. I don't think there's any lingering effect of earlier TBM dad teaching, but I was never really TBM like that.
Do you think it's because your disaffection started early enough, or do you think I'm overstating my point? Because I feel like, for me personally, the way I was raised, it took me 5 or 10 years and I said this to you guys over email, I think. It took me like 5 or 10 years to unravel some bass-ackwards ways of approaching the world. And I don't, and it angers me, for lack of a better word, it angers me so much that I'm going to podcast about it, but do nothing. It angers me to see that perpetuated by people who are otherwise seemingly intelligent and functioning in society in meaningful ways that shouldn't justify their way of perpetuating this bass-ackwards way of approaching the world. And if they could only, let go of the institutionalized church from dictating these methods of living life, it would just help society at large improve that much more quickly, and blah 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 blah. So either you got lucky and your kids weren't at a developmental age that was crucial enough or late enough that you were able to catch it before it happened. But I'm wondering if you see anything in your children, which is a weird question for me to ask of you, that even now you're like, oh, if I would have started earlier, or, oh, I can still see this lingering thing. But for them, they only have 1 year of fucked upness to reverse, not 5 or 10 that Bob had, or whatever.
No, my oldest daughter, she's a senior in high school this year, and last year she was the president of the LGBT club at school, and quoted in the newspaper locally here, very conservative. We've got the university nearby, but otherwise it's a pretty conservative area. Right. Right before gay marriage was legalized in Indiana, she had this quote in the paper about how backwards Indiana was because they didn't have, so she's got a very strong independent sense of right and wrong that I look at her and I don't know. I mean, so to answer your question, she's my oldest one, and I don't feel like there's any lingering residual stuff that, if I only would have started earlier, I would have been able to eradicate that, or however you worded it. And
right, but what about the inverse? Do you ever feel like, whew, I'm glad do you see yourself from the past and you're like, wow, if I was a parent, if I was still Glenn the parent from 10 years ago, oh my gosh. Or is that too easy of an easy win for me?
That's the question that
I think again, the biggest difference in me as a father today compared to 10 years ago is my marriage and divorce. It's not the church, because I'm much more free now to parent the way that I want to without having conflicts with my ex-wife. And that, she still tries every once in a while to correct things that she thinks are wrong in my approach, but she doesn't have any power over it. And it's not like she's totally got both feet in the church right now either, but there's still more, I think, that informs her approach on certain things in a really confusing way to my kids.
Right.
But I think that experience in my life doesn't make me a very good example of for other people. I don't know. I mean, it's a more unique situation. But I never. I don't know. I mean, the Glenn as the parent 10 years ago. Well, can you give me an example? Like, what sort of things would you expect me to have done differently?
Well, like the Glenn of 10 years ago. Maybe it's 15 years ago because you said you were already unraveling a bit. But the Glenn of 15 years ago, sitting down with his daughter and giving her the licked cupcake. Explanation for the birds and the bees.
But I would like when my oldest daughter was in 4th grade, we sat down and we did have a talk about the birds and the bees. But
the fact that you even had a talk is like, okay, let's go back 20 years.
Yeah, right.
20 years ago.
And she
some of
still
us didn't have a talk, Glenn. Just want to throw that out there. I'm not saying it was me. It was me.
She still jokes about it because I drew pictures. Like I had a little pencil, and I was pretty excited because I was learning all this anatomy at work. I work for a medical device company, and we were doing urological devices and women's health devices and things like that. So I started drawing these very.
And 4th grade, wow, that's
yeah.
Early.
She was 7, so 7 or 8, but she was starting to hear it from her friends, and so she was asking questions about that. And that was something I did with my ex-wife, and it wasn't an issue. There wasn't anything, lewd or explicit. It was just very straightforward. It was probably more than, like my son. We recently had this conversation, a couple of months ago, and I found a YouTube video. Oh, my daughter's been behind me the entire time listening. Do you want to come over here and say anything about this, Shaylee? I'm good. I'm going upstairs right now. She's giving me the thumbs up. I'm all right. I'm going to bed. Thanks, Dad.
I know Shaylee.
Yeah,
goodbye,
right.
Shaylee.
Yeah. So my son was asking me some questions, and I'm like, let's look up something on YouTube. And so I found something that was about, how sperm swims through the tubes and gets into the egg and fertilizes the egg. So we watched this. We watched all these millions of sperm swimming and coming to an egg and going inside. And he's like, "What the hell is this?" Well, yeah, this is
I need a little more.
This is what'll happen. And I said, "Okay, imagine that you've got a little factory."
I'm too sexy for wickedness. Too sexy for wickedness. There never was happiness.
But so my approach, even 10 years ago, even with my son now, has been pretty straightforward.
Well, let me ask you guys this: Did you?
Wait, hang on. I'm going to ask Shaylee. So Shaylee, Bob is asking me.
She's going to love that.
Are you going to come over here and talk?
Do you want me?
Yeah, come over here and sit down for a second.
Sure.
Okay. All right. I'm putting it on the speaker, so it's fine here. So Bob wants to know, with me as a parent. Why don't you ask her the question, Bob?
Have you noticed your dad changing in his way? Well, this is a weird question to ask you. How would you notice this? Have you noticed him raising you differently from when he was a believing member of the Mormon Church to where he is now, which is obviously quite different? Or has he always just been like the same person and approached things?
You can just say awesome. You can just say has always
has he been awesome this whole time, or was he kind of a dick in the past?
Less of a thing.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like he's always been pretty cool. And I mean, okay. I'm not just saying that to get like props, but I don't know. I feel like I heard the drawing pictures in 4th grade story. Whenever that was. But
what was that like for you?
Honestly, I kind of blocked it out of my memory a little bit.
You laugh about it.
I laugh about it because you reminded me, and then I vaguely remember like being in the study downstairs and freaking out internally. But I don't know. I feel like we've always been pretty cool, and I mean, I feel like I've been a lot more open with my dad, a lot more than I have been with my mom, which is probably kind of weird. But I feel like you've probably maybe been a little more like, whatever after you've kind of more officially gone away from Mormonism stuff. But
what do you mean more officially gone away?
Like allowed yourself to leave? Yeah, stop pretending.
Right, because you didn't stop attending until probably about 6 months after.
See, she thought that you said stopped pretending.
Oh.
I said stop attending with any sort of regularity.
But she remembers when I used to fake sick.
Yeah.
So that I wouldn't have to go to sacrament meeting, and that's why she's like, oh yeah, when he stopped pretending. Yeah,
well, or also being like, oh yeah, I seriously believe in whatever you want, and then to my mom being like, oh yeah, I'll go to church. Oh no, my back hurts.
That's pretty funny. So Shaylee, do you remember any stories or lessons that you learned in church that seemed kind of weird at the time, and then you approached your dad and he either confirmed or... So there's three options. He either like confirmed it and is like, oh yeah, that's totally the way you should live life, or he was like, no, let me tell you how it really is, or he just ignored it and was like, I don't want to talk about that.
I don't know. I feel like I've always been pretty stupid when it comes to church stuff. Like, where I... At least
you're self-aware.
Well, now. But, I mean, like, I never really realized that there were things that you weren't supposed to do. I mean, like, obviously there were things that I knew I wasn't supposed to do. But, like, I never really realized that sex was a bad thing or that drinking was a bad thing. I just knew that we didn't do it.
Oh,
so you didn't judge other people because they were drinking or smoking or anything like that?
Because I just didn't think that I was supposed to, which is probably because I was raised well.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I think what Bob's asking, were there times where you would hear a message at church and you would ask me about it and I would be like, oh, definitely, the bishop is right, or, you know, follow the prophet, Shayla, just follow the prophet.
I can't think of anything. Like... Maybe, I don't know, like off the top of my head, not really.
Just make something up. Throw him under the bus.
Just throw him under the bus a little bit.
Right. There's that one time when he was like, be ashamed of your body. And I was like, oh.
But even...
That's bad.
Thinking about when she was baptized and... Like the video.
Oh my god!
Yeah, the video that was made. It was like that song. You know, like the father singing about his daughter.
You were blessed.
Oh yeah, in the little white dress.
Pure and holy, in a little white dress. You were led into the water, and you were blessed. And the Father looked down. And the angels surrounded.
Oh, I hated that.
Cheesy.
Like I felt like I was put in some little teeny tiny box and had the nails all over me. I couldn't get out. You know, like I did not want to do that at all. But that wasn't my decision. Everybody else around made it such this special occasion, and I hated the messages that now you're clean.
Yeah.
You know, now you're clean. You're the cleanest person in here. It was like nails against a chalkboard for me. And so I'm sure my messages to her, you know, we're trying very diplomatically to diffuse some of those things that she was getting on the other side. But, you know.
So you don't remember watching Conference or...
like, the only things that I can think of are, like, little things where, like, if I wore like tight pants, I remember like the first time I wore skinny jeans, you kind of freaked out a little bit in 6th grade. Also, it was also the same day I wore makeup for the first time, and then I started asking for a second piercing, and then you and Mom gave me a talk.
Oh, the piercing talk. That's a good one. Let's double click on that. How did that go?
Yeah. So would you give her the same talk? I mean, if, you know,
she has the
Jonas wanted a second piercing in 6th grade, would you be bothered with that?
Well, she has the second piercing now, but I don't know. I mean, like if I think at that point it was just I thought she was too young for it. Then I thought there was something wrong with double piercings. It's not like I was getting my marching directions from Gordon B. Hinckley on piercings. I just felt like she was too young for it, and you know, there's a lot of things that she asks for, and I wait to see how badly she really wants it. You know, so you know, we'll delay on some things, but. Yeah, I don't know.
Right, but there's no memory of like the reason why you can't have a second piercing is because of the prophet. It was just standard parenting stuff, like because I don't say yes the first time on anything, and you're kind of young. But there's no like. It sounds like there's there aren't many examples of the prophet or the church determining.
Right, you were already in a position where your own personal standard of morality was the standard against which the church was compared, rather than the opposite. I mean, it sounds like in parenting, it was your morality that drove how you reacted to things, rather than the church's kind of overriding yours. If the church and you came in conflict, you kind of disregarded it a little bit and said, push it to the side, said, nah, that's not that important. What I think is this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the case?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense, because this is like not an acceptable bedtime by church standards. It's pretty late for Shaylee at this hour, isn't it?
It's midnight where we are, and she's going in for her driver's license test tomorrow.
I don't know what kind of parent you are, but the church would not approve.
Well, I'll tell you, it's not my fault. I was just sitting here podcasting, and she was behind me in the kitchen the whole time.
It's okay. I'll have coffee in the morning when I wake up.
Okay.
Yeah. That's like two sins in the space of 8 hours.
Thank you, Shaylee.
Oh. Yep.
Good night.
Good night.
Love you.
Good night, Shaylee.
Good night, guys.
Yeah. So did you get what you wanted there?
Yeah, I think so. I think we just confirmed that you exited the church early enough. I could be overstating my point still. I feel like I need more conclusive evidence, but I swear that
well, here, like, as far as you say exiting the church, I mean, I think that's a really broad statement to make. It was that appeal to authority was one of the first things to fall for me.
Got it.
You know, so it wasn't like I'm saying you need to act this way because that's what the brethren say, and we're following that.
I should have asked her about rated R movies. That would have been perfect.
We watched Dexter when she was 14 years old.
Okay, that eliminates that one.
Well, yeah. So it sounds like, I mean, the thing is, the practical kind of boots on the ground appeal to Mormonism is there something you otherwise would feel is appropriate that you did not do specifically because you felt like Mormonism and the construct of Mormonism did not allow it? And that, it seems like in the vast majority of cases, you just said, fuck it, I'm doing it anyway, because, you know, you rejected that, like you said, that appeal to authority. So it doesn't really apply in a parenting context, because you were already past the point where you felt like something you really felt was okay, but the church didn't necessarily feel was okay. You were more comfortable with the fact of just saying, do it.
Well,
go ahead.
But I think the conversation right now is focusing on the things that I didn't accept about Mormonism instead of the things that I did accept about Mormonism, and there was a lot of that was influencing my parenting as well. You know, so like I think that the message on charity that Joseph Smith plagiarized from the New Testament are fantastic. You know, in Moroni, right. You know, that charity suffereth long and is not puffed up and seeketh not her own, and you know, that whole thing I think is great. I think that's fantastic compass for the direction of your life. And so I would try to instill those values in my kids, almost to the point, you know, like I did that thing where I would find the scriptures that justified disobedience. You know, so if my thing was rejecting authority, I would find that D&C scripture that says it's not meet that ye should be commanded in all things for the same as a slothful and not a wise servant. And I had that in my holster to pull out anytime somebody said, you're not supposed to eat that Tic Tac when you're fasting, you know, and I'm like, look, dude, come on. You know, you should just be doing good continually, and you'll in no wise lose your reward. And, you know, so like when you can start using the scriptures against the church, you know, you're on your way out. But or at least you've carved out this nice middle ground for yourself, which is where I was for a long time. You know, thinking that the atonement is a great story. That
it strikes me as it just could have been a lot worse. I think this is the point where we need to do a call to action. So any listeners out there, we want to hear your shittiest why you sucked as a parent story before you came out of the church. Please reconfirm the narrative me as a non-parent is hypothetically assuming is true, so I can feel better, because Glenn's not really doing it for me here.
Well, the thing is, this goes back to something that I wanted to put together. I mean, eventually I'd like to put together into an episode. Is there's some disposition within people that leave the church, and I don't know what it is, but there's some latent similarity that we have between people that leave the church at least over like intellectual type issues. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, they left the church 20 years ago. They started this, when they were 15, and they decided, you know what, rated R movies aren't that bad. I'm fucking watching V for Vendetta.
So
fuck it, I'm doing it.
So you know what I mean? You're going the slippery slope route.
Yes.
When you choose the very first step on the road, you also choose the last.
Yes, exactly. I think the slippery slope is exactly the thing. Is the more I listen to Boyd K. Packer, the more I agree with him. From the context of Mormonism, if you want to stay a Mormon, you have to stay 50 fucking miles away from the edge, because the moment that you cross that edge and you realize, the moment that you get to the Glenn's point where you cross it and you're just like, you know what, I'm not really down for this appeal to authority. The entire Mormon theology is all based around an appeal to authority. Well, that's all it is.
But it's not even about that. It's you go over the edge and you're like, I'm not falling.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not.
Exactly.
This isn't. I've gotten as close as I could. I've jumped off. It's like Indiana Jones in that Holy Grail movie, and he takes that leap of faith, and it's there. He just couldn't see it.
It's a leap of faith. You must believe, boy. You must believe.
So exactly. Boyd K. Packer, I'm taking a leap of faith, man. I'm not disobeying you. But
what Jake's talking about, I think, is a legitimate narrative. But dare I say, though, I think you might have overstated it. I'll just say I don't know. I feel like I've heard enough cases of people being like balls to the wall Mormon until they're 35 or whatever, and then they start and then like overnight or within weeks or months it all comes crashing down. Mine, it's funny too, because it's also a perception issue. I still claim that I had my huge big crisis of faith in March of 2007. I remember when it all came crashing down, and then I took my first drink like a year later, because that's what people do, is become alcoholic. No. So, but then if you ask my wife and you're like, when did this happen? She'd be like, starting in about 2004 or 5. I'm like, what? 2 or 3 years earlier? And she's like, yeah, you were always having excuses not to go to church, and you didn't really do things the way that other people did them. You weren't as vested. You were kind of doing your like, I'm a Mormon, but I blog more about it than I actually do it in real life. And I'm like, oh, that's
no. Yeah, but that's only when the real aspects of it bubbled up. I would argue that the first time you became an ex-Mormon is when you watched an R-rated movie and said, fuck it, I love this movie. This is one of my favorite movies. The moment that an R-rated movie became one of your favorite movies, that's when you became an ex-Mormon. Because if you step a toe outside of what of Mormonism is, and you accept and internally you reject the narrative that Mormonism can dictate your life to the nth degree and dictate what's happiness for you, the moment that breaks down, those are the seeds, man. And it's just a matter of time. And you're not going to fall, but the vast majority of people that do that fall.
Well, but hang on, because you're saying that the vast majority of people will eventually fall, but you've also said that once you've done that, you're already an ex-Mormon.
Yeah.
So that's the part you're overstating.
Well, that's the part. All the people that are ex-Mormon have had that experience, I would say.
but not necessarily.
Not necessarily about rated R movies, but there was that one thing.
Yeah.
Right, there was that one thing that where they blatantly disregarded, or they went outside of the bounds of Mormonism.
They read
knew they were going outside. Exactly, they knew they were going outside the bounds of Mormonism.
They went to that website.
Anyway.
They listened to that podcast.
Right, and said, you know what, I'm okay with the fact that I listened to that podcast. Yeah. If they don't have, if they get to the point where they have peace, where they find some sort of internal peace about violating the tenets of Mormonism, that's the moment when they realize these people don't have any authority. They're just making shit up. Because and it takes a long time for that bullet to hit, but I feel like that's the bullet. There's Mormonism is a totalitarian religion. It's not fucking compartmentalized, and they don't pitch it that way, and nobody internalizes it that way.
Jake, how go ahead, Bob.
I was just going to say, then you're indirectly stating that there's literally millions of ex-Mormons living as Mormons right now.
Yeah,
because I'm pretty sure if you whittle it down to the smallest subset of pure Mormons who haven't crossed that line in any way whatsoever, it's going to be like Boyd K. Packer himself. I don't know. I feel like we're all ex-Mormons though, and so it's too much of a.
See,
it feels.
Here's what I want to ask you, Jake, because I remember the first day you came to the ward here. And I remember you standing there in your hipster vest and, looking very dapper in your Sunday outfit and standing up in front of the Elders Quorum doing that little 20 questions crap game that we did. And you were just fun. Sure. It was fun every time. It was like the best part.
It literally was the best part.
But it was cheesy. It was so cheesy, But anyway. So at that point, had you watched rated R movies? Had you?
Yes.
Jake. So you were standing in front of that group as a latent ex-Mormon.
Yes, I would say that. Yes,
really,
absolutely. Yeah, exactly. I was a latent ex-Mormon. The characteristics, Okay, so I guess what I'm saying is it's a necessary condition to reject Mormonism, but it's not a sufficient condition or characteristic to reject Mormonism.
Yeah, because
not everybody that has this not everybody has this disposition, but everybody that has left Mormonism has had this disposition. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm asserting. Yeah. And it's the ability to reject authoritarian statements about how you should live your life. If you have that disposition in you, every person that has left Mormonism has had that disposition within them. That isn't to say that every single person that has that disposition will leave Mormonism, because some other people they're just I fucking love it here. There's an emotional connection that they feel that's beyond whatever they want to. That supersedes anything else. But every person that has left Mormonism has had the disposition to reject authoritarian dictates about how to live their life. And if you have that within you, that's very strongly correlated with the probability that you leave Mormonism.
I wonder how many people that is. I wonder what the population of Mormonism is that is like people that would leave if somebody just gave them a get out of jail free card for all of the horrible stuff that supposedly would happen.
Yeah, I think the issue that I still have, Jake, with what you're saying, I agree that it's a huge step to allow yourself to question and be okay with it. But there's still so many threads that you have to disconnect in order to really be free. And it seems like it's not just this one thread that's cut and then boom, you're out. No.
It's not then boom, you're out. Yeah. But it takes a while for that bullet to hit. But I think if you give it enough time, what I'm saying is that is the characteristic that will eventually drive you out of Mormonism if you leave Mormonism. Because eventually you'll get to the point where you're not holding the church up as the standard and everything else relative to that as some sort of comparison. Right. But eventually it switches where you hold your own moral compass up as the standard and the church is compared to that. And when you get to that moment, that is the moment when you really start to leave Mormonism quickly. is the moment when you flip that relationship where you're the standard and they're the ones to be compared against you. And when that happens, I feel like that starts the process real quick.
Well, and for me, that's a pretty good description of my experience with it. I mean, it took. I was able to deal with it for a long time, but there's an element of judgment, and I know at some point we want to talk about judgment. It's not going to happen tonight, but there's that judgment where you put yourself as a standard, and everybody else has to measure up to you, instead of you saying, I'm going to allow Boyd K. Packer to set the standard, and everything I do has to measure up to him, or even in some cases, some unnamed, unrecognized general authority. Because I remember this lesson in Elders Quorum where they were talking about reading your scriptures or something like that, and somebody made the comment, it was something along the lines of, this one apostle came to our mission, or this one general authority came to our mission, and he told us X, Y, or Z. And I don't know who he was, I don't remember, but he was a general authority, so he's definitely smarter than me. And I remember hearing that comment and being like, what? No, you guys think that? That's what you think? That you don't know who he is, but you're just going to accept by default that they're smarter than you because they're a general authority. So you're just going to defer to that rank or something. That became so intolerable for me and just angered me all the time, because we couldn't have any real discussions because it was always an appeal to an authority. And, it's that, I kind of hate this trope, but the thinking has already been done. The church has done the thinking for you, so you don't have to think yourself. But it's like, that's what it was. I hated it.
Well, that's essentially what Mormonism is. It's an appeal to authority.
Yeah.
At some point, you nail down and the only thing that Mormonism argues about is what's the actual authority to hold up. But eventually, it's an appeal to authority. You get to a point where there are some sources of information that are never questioned, and if you question those sources of authority, then it all falls apart. I mean, it's built into the theology that there has to be some source of authority that you never ever question.
So is it possible to bring this full circle and wrap it up? Because we started really down this path by talking about ideology. And just a repulsion towards ideology. Is there a way to connect that here at the end and bring that full circle? I'm feeling like it's close, but I can't quite grasp it.
I mean, that's why I'm so cynical about ideology, and that's why I avoid it, is because I spent so much of my life subscribing to some sort of just submitting myself to some sort of moral authority, some sort of external party that could dictate moral authority.
Yeah.
And so I'm very reticent to do that again.
Right. So you went through this experience in the Mormon Church where you rejected the appeal to authority. And you said, I'm going to become the standard. I'm going to take my risks. I'm going to roll the dice. I could be wrong, but I'm going to do this on my terms. And so then when you're out of Mormonism, you don't want to come up against anything else that requires that appeal to authority, and maybe it's a political ideology, but it just requires that tacit approval and acceptance, and questioning is discouraged. That's the sort of thing that you're going to reject.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I feel an impulse to reject. Yeah. And so but that's a double-edged sword, because, as Bob and I talked about earlier, it kind of feeds into a mentality and a disposition to not do anything ever and just fucking sit around on my ass, never do anything, because the soup kitchens don't really help people, or I can always find some reason why it doesn't really fit into the ultimate need that I want to do, and so there's some. Yeah, anyway.
but here's I'm going to challenge that a little bit, because while you're sitting on your ass, you're also creating Brother Jake videos that I'm not going to get all altruistic and say that they're changing the world in any way, but they're at least they're expressing your thoughts in ways that other people can take them and benefit from them or not. You are making a contribution. You're contributing something. So you're doing more than I'm thinking of that Mormon hymn, then wake up and do something more than dream of your merchants of that. But you are doing more than just sitting on your ass and playing video games and watching movies.
That may be true, but Glenn, what am I doing? So Jake's got it all figured out.
You're doing Infants on Thrones.
Here. What do we do? Right here, man.
You're creating
something right here.
All right.
You're doing practically ideal for people who do not know how to enjoy movies on their own, like movies, TV, pop culture. They need to understand
Is that practically culture?
Is it?
It's practically culture.
Oh, it's practically culture now. It used to be
whatever it is.
ideal.
It's certainly worth 8 hours of Diablo following this. Right. It's like there's like some ratio of like if I broadcast amazing podcasts, and that's in my own head worth taking no action whatsoever and spending time on myself for this much time.
Right. Well, I mean, the podcast does take time, and it is something that's out there as a contribution and a product that people do tell us that they get benefit from. Now, we've said this before and restated. That's not why I'm doing it. I'm not trying to change the world or make a transition to faith easier for people. I'm doing it because I like it. It's fun. It's fun to create that product, and it's fun to have discussions like this.
And if those things happen on the side, sure, sounds good. If it helps,
right?
If I could have had discussions like if I could have had discussions like this in Elders Quorum, I would not have been as dissatisfied with church. Because I like having these kinds of discussions, and I think that people who listen to the podcast like hearing them, and they engage in it somehow, even though they're just kind of passively receiving it. They come on the website and have a discussion with us, a little bit. But to me, it's the intellectual exercise of trying to work through issues. Not that we have all the answers to them, but we're working through them, I think, in an interesting way.
Yep, it's true. In the name of all that is holy and pure. I don't know why I said
that. Brothers and sisters, my name is Kaya from Aurora, Colorado. And I like to bear my testimony that I know Infants on Thrones is true. I know this podcast loves me. I know that it teaches the philosophies of men, mingled with humor. I know you can comment on this episode on the website infantsonthrones.com. I know if you really like what you hear, you can give the quorum a 5-star rating. If the Holy Ghost prompts you, you can write a short review. You can write a short review on iTunes. My dad did. And I say these things in the name of anyone for the closing prayer. Amen.
Good job. I guess it would be nice. Show me that things can be nice.